Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking to Jacob Anderson all about Interview with the Vampire. And one of the things I remember you describing in terms of Louis is that there's kind of these two versions. There's the version of himself that he presents and that he describes to other people, and that actually you find that a lot of the times the truth is completely the opposite of what he's narrating. And so I was interested in
Yeah.
the way that you look at the scripts and the way that he's self-describing so that you can then play the opposing viewpoint in actuality a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think because our show kind of exists in so many different timelines and so many different like versions of the truth as well, it is kind of like the only way really that I can sort of manage that for myself is to just like scene by scene, day by day, moment by moment, figure out where he is. I think like where I get to really play with it and have the most fun with it is always in Dubai because like he is presenting, he's very much presenting a sort of considered version of himself in Dubai in a way that I think in Paris he's trying on something, but it's still him, and he's around Claudia a lot of the time. So it's like there is a level of comfort. Whereas I think with Daniel, until it sort of, I mean, actually, in the beginning of this season two, it does break, and then he like switches it back on again. I was just talking in another interview about about voice, how important uh Louis' accent is, and like I always sort of said I would never talk about this, but it's fine because when you know the Dubai chapter is sort of finished, but like I always thought of that Louis modeled himself or his own voice on like James Baldwin and like took his speech patterns and sort of like co-opted them as his own. So like it was really fun in the second season to just like keep chipping away at that, and then you just feel like as he loosens up with Daniel, you feel New Orleans starting to come back, and then by the end he's just like this sort of, hopefully it feels like this complete amalgamation of the Louis that he invented in say the late 70s, early 80s, and the Louis he was in 1910, and then who he is now in present day. So that's really fun. It's like it's a little game that I like to I like to play with myself and with Eric, and hopefully hopefully the audience picked up on it as well. Um, so yeah, my voice and body language tend to be the tools that I use the most to get that across. But yeah, it's less daunting and more just fun when I break it down into little bite-sized
No,
moments in a day.
it's wonderful the way that you did that and made all those changes. And like you mentioned in the conversations with Daniel in season two, the facade is kind of coming away a little bit, unintentionally so, but we see more coming to the surface. And then there's the added aspect of Armand being by his side for a lot of the telling and things that suddenly come to the surface in their relationship and some of the conflicts that suddenly bubble up. And how did you look at the retelling of events and where you felt like, oh, actually, he's been holding on to this emotion for that whole time, or he didn't realize that he still felt this way, and suddenly it's going to surprise him.
Yeah, it's like again, it's a fun kind of game of I really like to sort of repurpose really heightened emotions into like a domestic version of events, and then really domestic things I have to sort of heighten them. I'm always trying to rationalize each moment in that way. And I think with Armand, that particular thing that you're talking about, I think, when there's a couple who are out with friends and they might be telling the same story, but the way they say it, they kind of make themselves seem more heroic in that moment, or they might make themselves sort of meeker and more like I don't know. They kind of they either lionize or shrink themselves depending on the friend that they're with. And I feel like Louis and Armand have that dynamic uh, regularly. It's just that I think with them, there's a lot that's being revealed to each person in how they tell it. It's not just a case of like, well, it didn't happen like that. You're greasing it a bit. It's more like for Armand, I think it's I don't want to speak for Assad, but it's like, oh, you know more than I thought you knew. You're slightly you operate on a level of intelligence and memory that I didn't know you had. And I think for Louis, it's it's more like you are there's a level of deception to you that even having lived with you for 70 years, I had no idea you could really go there. And actually in season two, it's like maybe I'm not safe. I had an inkling, but maybe this is not a safe environment. It's not a safe relationship for me to be in. What am I going to do about that? Yeah.
We also see all these moments where there's times for Louis where it's easier to deflect blame onto other people rather than to be self-reflective of his own actions. And I was interested in how you really look for those moments where he's talking about someone else's actions hurting him or harming him, but actually it's to avoid looking inside of himself.
Yeah. Th- it's what I love so much about the last time you see Louis in season two is I feel like it holds so much accountability. He is holding so much the accountability that he actually should hold, but also he's the portrait of Paul and Claudia's dress. He's able to remind himself daily. He's able to look at his mistakes and see them as what they were at the time. Their love. These are two people that he really loved and really truly was changed by. And his relationship with them is not just a product of his mistakes. He's able to like contain a lot of things at one time. Um, but yeah, I feel like Louis just gets sometimes the things I think he blames himself for are not the things he needs to blame himself for. And the things he actually did do wrong, he can't he can't acknowledge. um, but again, it just like it's quite fun to lie. It's quite fun to have permission to lie. And Louis is constantly lying. It's just like my theory on Louis has always been that like he's like uh super vampiric. Like he wants blood. He does want to harm humans. He has like this kind of these like intrusive uh, urges and instincts that are constantly flowing through him. So he overcompensates. He's always overcompensating. He's gotten so used to doing that that by present day Dubai, it just sort of like trips out of him and he manages to make it lyrical and beautiful and literary. Um, but he's giving himself away the more he does that, especially to Malloy, because he's like, you seem like an asshole. You're just coming across as pretension. But yeah, I think there is like a real like primal rage inside of Louis, and the only way for him to contain it is to try and be elegant, to try and be uh yeah, to try and be elegant, I guess.
I love that description of the primal rage because I think even when it's so emotional for him to see Lestat taking to the stage during the trial at the theater, there's
Mm.
also that bubbling, there's the rage and the unresolved anger between the two of them at the same time. And what were some of the surprising elements that you found emotionally that Louis experiencing throughout that whole duration of the trial?
I think the thing that was most surprising to me that was kind of text it was kind of in the script, but kind of wasn't. But that I just kept thinking while we were shooting it was like, I think Louis really missed him. It's just they're in this horrific situation. It's like it's as close to a lynching as you could get in this context. It's horrible. It's awful. His daughter slash sister's life is is on the balance, and so is his. But the love that he has for the stat can't help but just like bleed in, trickle in. And that's got to be an incredibly confronting thing to feel. Um, and again, the thing that was like, this is quite a big challenge actually, to not just try and play fear all the time, not to try and play fear and anger, but to try and like just put like a little bit of love in it, and a little bit again like bringing it back to the domestic. Like I cannot believe that you're doing this to us. I cannot believe you're doing this to our family, even though they killed him, or they poisoned him. Um, yeah, so that was kind of a surprise to me, especially as a lot of what Lestat is revealing about their relationship and about their home and their history. Um, Louis doesn't necessarily come off that well. He'd have every reason to be defensive. But again, maybe he's not defensive because, the bits that are true about that are true. And he may die. So now's the time to just let it come out. Yeah. It's been a long
Totally.
time. It's like I'm remembering this stuff as we talk about it.
No, I'm impressed that you still remember this many details because I know you've also been working on season three as well. So we also get to see, the nature of the two of them when they were intentionally trying to hurt each other and trying to break each other. And those scenes are so physical between you and Sam.
Mm.
And, you're literally flinging each other around the room and covered in blood. But at the same time, it comes from such a guttural, emotional place. And I was curious if you just remember some of the elements that went into those scenes together.
Do you mean the coffin room? The
Essentially, the flashback to when they're really trying to go at each other and hurt each other, as they're
yeah,
describing in the court case.
yeah. I think for Sam and I, that scene was just it was really surreal. It was, it was just really like, what are we doing? Especially for me, it was really that sort of new Louis that you don't really see, which I think is that like primal thing coming out, that like that rage that he so often hides. He's like he just lets it out in that moment. It unleashes, and he goes into like protector mode, and but also just the cruelty in it. And I wasn't used to playing that out loud. Like it was always just something that I just held on to myself. Um, so it was interesting to yeah to to let it out, and quite cathartic to be honest. But again, I think Sam and I managed to find the fun in those days. You know, I think particularly season two, we were apart so much that like to be back in, we're in Prague, but like to be back in that house and to be literally back in season one, um, it was pretty funny, and the emotional part was the Claudia birth scene. That felt really like it felt almost blasphemous to me. Maybe because I felt defensive of Louis. I was just like, this is so he's in such a low place and this feels so pathetic. I remember yeah, I can say this. Like I really felt very strongly that I didn't want Louis to kneel. I didn't want him to kneel at Lestat. I just I didn't like the optics of it. Like and it wasn't scripted. It's not that it was scripted that he pleads with Lestat. But I was just like, I can't, I don't want that image. I don't want Louis like bending in that way to Lestat and being like, please, and the begging. it just felt like a betrayal of Louis. But then when we rehearsed the scene, I was like, that's exactly what it has to be. It has to be the most uncomfortable feeling. It has to be, um, again, you're like seeing a version of Louis that I never thought when we first started you'd ever actually see. And it is this like fear and this kind of like little boy version of Louis, and the Catholicism coming in as well, or the Catholic guilt, and the idea of like kneeling and prostrating yourself. Um, but it was really confronting. And I remember actually saying when we finished shooting, I'd like said to Roland, I was like, I didn't want to kneel. And he was like, I didn't tell you to. He was like, it was right, but I didn't tell you to. Yeah. That stuff, going back and doing that stuff, a lot of the time I was like, I feel like something else is like taking over, doing it for me. It's like going against every instinct I have for this character. Yeah, it's interesting.
One of the other ways that we got to see such a different side of Louis as well is after he's been condemned by the coven and he is able to escape because Armand moves the coffin for him. And he self describes that it was just, he was fueled by anger and madness. And we see how it just starts spiraling for him. Did you go into that with an idea of how to play it, or did you really have to step into that space to just find the extremity of how far you wanted to push that?
As when he goes back to kill everyone.
Yeah, and even just all the scenes afterwards when we just see him kind of like plotting and planning and putting it all together.
Yeah. Um, it's a really difficult. I think madness is a really complicated thing to play because it looks different to everyone. There's no, like we all have different versions of it. And some of us appear very kind of stable, and actually, we have like we have madness running through us. But like, I think I thought a lot about Louis sort of going. It's like he's going through a manic episode, which is something that I've seen. Um, and again, it's one of those things it's a show about vampires, but I wanted it to feel familiar and truthful. Um, uh, I don't really know how to talk about that bit of it because I did sort of like go into a bit of a fugue state whenever we were doing it. Like not in like I'm not method, but like between takes, I was just myself. But like I always had like a bit of a run up. I feel like Levin just like subconsciously gave me a bit of a run up, and I just sort of got a bit lost um in that. But yeah, there's something kind of again, something kind of fun, I guess, about like letting loose and being like allowing things to come out that that I probably would have held in before. Yeah, the
I
meow
also wanted,
that was that was a surprise. There was a cat in the room. I don't know what else I was supposed to do.
you did exactly what you were meant to. I
Spoken
also
its
wanted,
language.
yeah. I also wanted to talk about the moment where he discovers that Lestat was actually the one to convince the audience to say banishment instead of death, and that it wasn't Armand as he's perpetrated for 70 years in their relationship. Because there's the anger that he feels towards Armand, which, we don't see it happen on screen, but we see the immediate aftermath of that with the two of them. And then the way that it just recomplicates all of his emotions with Lestat all over again, especially when he realizes he never told me that he did that and he kept it to himself. And I was just interested in those two juxtapositions and how it really changes both of those relationships for him.
Yeah. Um, my feeling is that Louis always had just an inkling that Armand, there was always something like sort of untrustworthy about him. I think as well, it dream stat like the hallucination of Lestat um is kind of telling you that because he's Louis' subconscious and he's constantly undermining like these romantic moments or these kind of gestures that Armand makes. Um, and I think like through reading what the hallucination of Lestat was doing, that always gave me clues about how Louis really felt about him. So by the time that reveal happened, I feel like the best way to describe it is like their relationship. I think Louis and Armand are sort of like they care about each other, at least in Dubai in present day. They do care about each other. You don't spend that long with somebody and not develop feelings. I think they don't have the kind of intense love, but I think they do care about each other. And I think for Louis to just have this inkling for 70 years and then just be like, but maybe not actually. Like maybe I'm just being paranoid, kind of gaslighting himself with Armand's help, of course. Um, I think it's just that moment of like, I can't actually believe um that you would actually do that. Really that you'd do that to to Claudia, you would let that happen to Claudia and that you would let me live through that. I think that's part of the betrayal for Lestat is that like you didn't save her. I don't know. Maybe that's just like that's not really in the show. That's just for me.
But the
Um,
emotion of it is still there.
the emotion of it is still there, yeah. And I'm sure he's worked through that a little bit because he takes responsibility for what happened to Claudia, or takes his part of the responsibility. Yeah, I guess the juxtaposition of it is just like I wasted all this time. Like Lestat and Louis, what they have is undeniable. It's just there. It's just in the ether. It's a part of who both of them are at this point. And Louis, in order to punish Lestat, has just wasted like 70 years of his life with this person who actually is just keeping him. Like it's just he's like a kept object. Cut his nose off to spite his face. Um, so yeah, I think he takes his frustration out on Armand, and I think that's fair.
And
I'm
lastly,
so cool about it all the time. Assad is wonderful. It's
yeah,
just Armand gets under my
yeah.
skin.
Lastly, we see so much in Louis and his journey of his acceptance of his vampiric nature and the fact that he spent so long thinking of it as a curse, and he is in a place at the end of season two where he has that conversation with Lestat and he really truly sees and understands it as a gift now. And I was interested in just where you really found him in episode 8, where he's embracing it in a completely different way, more on the surface for himself.
Yeah, I think he's found peace. Like Louis is always, I think, from childhood, has always had this feeling that he doesn't fit anywhere. He's wrong. He was he was designed wrong, and the way that he has to present uh, is is in the antithesis. He has to present himself in an antithetical way to how he feels and to how he really responds to things. And I think that in vampirism, that's something that in being turned, that's something that he inherits from his human self. And it just continues and it just builds and then sits as just this eternal shame. Like shame, he's so guided by shame all the time. And I feel like that moment, that final moment for him is like uh, a level of self acceptance and peace that he didn't have. I think in order to get that, he has to like take some accountability. He has to understand the story of him and Claudia. He has to understand the story of him and Paul and his family and take responsibility for his part in that, rather than it being like the world doesn't want me as I am. The world doesn't want me. The world doesn't want me. It can be like, okay, the world might not want me, but I have also rejected the world myself out of fear and out of shame and out of guilt and all these things. Um, so I think for him to finally accept himself in some way, even if it's I accept myself as a vampire now, it's kind of like the apex of Louis, I think, of who he can possibly be. And like, I think that was just deeply satisfying for me. I love Louis so much, and I hate how much he's hurting all the time. And so to feel that um, that release and that relief from hurt, at least for a little while, I find that really powerful, really beautiful. Um, yeah, I think I think it's all about peace and self-acceptance, which is a really, really difficult thing to get and to find in any lifetime.
And I think the love that you have for this character is so evident in your performance, and you can always tell the level of thought and detail that's gone into everything. So thank you so much for talking about all of this, Jacob. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Mara.